In the golden age of magazines, one name could change everything: Playboy. For many actresses, appearing on its cover wasn't just about exposure, it was a career move, a statement, sometimes a reinvention. And while some covers were expected, others stopped the world cold. In our first video, we looked at the icons who defined the connection between vintage cinema and Playboy's legacy. But there were more, many more. Some were legends already. Others used the magazine to break free from Hollywood's tight image control. A few surprised everyone with their timing, their age, or simply the fact that they said yes. This time we're going deeper. From soap opera stars to Bond girls, from the elegant to the outrageous. These are the women who stepped into the spotlight on their own terms and left the rest of us stunned. If Marilyn Monroe was the myth, Jane Mansfield was the reaction. Blonde, bold, and built to be noticed, she never tried to play it subtle, and that was exactly her strategy. In the 1950s and early 60s, Jane was Hollywood's most shameless sex symbol. She didn't flirt with the line, she erased it. While other actresses were carefully packaged by studios, Jane leaned into exaggeration. She wasn't trying to be respectable. She was trying to be unforgettable. Her appearances in Playboy were legendary. She posed multiple times, smiling, winking, always aware of the performance. For her, the magazine wasn't just exposure, it was a stage. Jane knew the power of an image, and she weaponized it. Critics called her vulgar. Studios called her risky. But Jane didn't care. She wasn't trying to win Oscars. She was trying to win attention. And in an era when women were told to play it safe, she played to the back row and still stole the scene. She didn't just appear in Playboy. She set the tone for every cover that followed. For most of her career, Linda Evans was the picture of elegance. She starred in beloved TV dramas like The Big Valley, and later became a cultural icon as Crystal Carrington in Dynasty, the ultimate primetime soap of the 80s. So when she appeared in Playboy in 1971, it caught people off guard. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was so tasteful. The photos were soft, understated, almost serene. There was no attempt to provoke, just quiet glamour, lit like a movie scene. Linda wasn't trying to shock the public. She was reminding them that beauty could be mature, composed, and deeply confident. She didn't need reinvention. She just stepped forward, and the world followed. Years later, that same poise would define her comeback on Dynasty. But it was Playboy that first allowed her to break free from the nice girl roles and present herself as something far more complex. A woman in control of her image, her career, and her legacy. By the time Angie Dickinson appeared in Playboy in 1966, she wasn't a rising star. She was already a respected actress, known for films like Rio Bravo, and for breaking ground on TV with Policewoman. So, when she said yes to Playboy, it wasn't about launching her career, it was about owning it. The photos weren't provocative by today's standards, but at the time they felt daring. Angie was in her mid-30s, at the height of her career, and she chose to present herself not as a studio product, but as a woman on her own terms. She didn't need the exposure, she chose the moment, and that made it powerful. Angie's appearance in Playboy challenged expectations. She wasn't a model trying to act. She was an actress redefining what a star could look like, confident, in her prime, and unafraid of being seen. In a decade where Hollywood tried to box women in, Angie Dickinson stepped outside the frame and let the camera follow. In the late 1990s, Denise Richards was everywhere. After roles in Starship Troopers, Wild Things, and The World Is Not Enough, she had become one of the most recognizable and talked about faces in Hollywood. Then, in 2004, she appeared in Playboy. It wasn't reckless, it wasn't rebellious, it was calculated. By that point, Denise had already established herself as a sex symbol. But Playboy gave her something else: control. The shoot was polished, confident, and far from the wild energy of her earlier roles. She wasn't playing a character. She was simply being herself. The timing was perfect. She had just gone through a very public divorce and wanted to remind the industry and the audience that she was still in command. For Denise, Playboy wasn't about reinvention. It was about reassertion. She didn't need to shock anyone. She just had to show up and let the camera do the rest. Few celebrities embraced the Playboy aesthetic quite like Carmen Electra. She wasn't just on the cover. She was the cover, again and again. With her bombshell looks, pin-up curves, and unapologetic style, Carmen didn't pose for Playboy as a one-time career move. She made it part of her personal brand. Starting in the late 90s and continuing into the 2000s, her appearances in the magazine weren't just photo shoots, they were events. Carmen brought the full MTV energy, Baywatch glam, and tabloid flair to every page. And she knew exactly what she was doing. But underneath the spectacle was strategy. Carmen Electra understood the media cycle. She knew how to keep herself visible, relevant, and profitable. And Playboy gave her the perfect platform to amplify her image, her way. She didn't just benefit from the magazine. She helped shape what Playboy became in the 2000s. Carmen wasn't just featured, she was a fixture, and proud of it. Before Desperate Housewives, before the Emmys, and long before she became a household name, Teri Hatcher made a choice that surprised a lot of people. She posed for Playboy in 1997. At the time, she was best known for playing Lois Lane in Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, a family-friendly TV role that didn't leave much room for risk. But Teri had more to say, and Playboy gave her the space to say it. The photos were elegant, carefully lit, and restrained, closer to high-fashion editorial than anything scandalous. Teri wasn't trying to shock. She was making a point that actresses didn't have to be boxed in. That a woman could be playful, provocative, and still taken seriously. Her Playboy appearance wasn't about reinvention. It was about range. Years later, when she returned to TV in a darker, more complex role, audiences were ready, because they'd already seen the shift coming. Teri Hatcher used Playboy not to change public opinion, but to stay one step ahead of it. Born into literary royalty as the granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway, Margot Hemingway seemed destined for greatness. Tall, striking, and effortlessly photogenic, she became one of the most sought-after models of the 1970s, gracing the covers of Vogue, Cosmopolitan, and eventually, Playboy. Her appearance in the magazine in 1979 was bold and opulent. The photos captured her larger-than-life beauty. But behind the lens, Margot was already struggling. With fame, with addiction, and with the impossible weight of a name that carried more than just expectations. The Playboy shoot was a moment of power for her. A chance to reclaim her narrative and stand in full control of her image. But it was also a moment of vulnerability. The world saw glamour. She was asking to be seen. Tragically, her story ended far too soon. But the legacy she left, especially in how she confronted the public gaze, still resonates. Margot didn't pose to prove anything. She posed to be understood. And in that, she gave us more than just beauty. She gave us honesty. By the time Nancy Sinatra posed for Playboy in 1995, she was 54 years old, and decades past her chart-topping hit, These Boots Are Made for Walkin'. But the shoot wasn't about reliving the past, it was about rewriting it. Dressed in a leather jacket and still wearing those iconic boots, Nancy's photos felt like a wink to her legacy and a reminder that confidence doesn't have an expiration date. It wasn't about shock, it was about attitude. She didn't need to prove she was still relevant. She simply showed up and let the lens do the rest. In a youth-obsessed industry, Nancy Sinatra reminded everyone, style, cool, and presence don't fade, they just evolve. Joan Collins had been a star for decades, long before Dynasty turned her into the ultimate primetime icon in the 1980s. So when she posed for Playboy in 1983 at age 50, it wasn't a reinvention, it was a statement. The shoot was elegant, cinematic, and unmistakably Joan. All confidence, no compromise. She wasn't chasing relevance, she was relevance. In a time when women were expected to step out of the spotlight at a certain age, Joan stepped into it with more power than ever. And in stilettos, naturally. She didn't just pose to be seen, she posed to remind you she had never left. Elegant, exotic, and always mysterious, Barbara Carrera was a standout in 1983's Never Say Never Again as Fatima Blush, one of the boldest Bond girls of the decade. That same year, she appeared in Playboy. The shoot was stylized and almost theatrical, much like her film presence. Barbara didn't just bring glamour, she brought intensity with a look that balanced sensuality and strength. Her appearance in the magazine felt more like a film still than a photo shoot. She wasn't playing to fantasy, she was crafting an image. And like all great femme fatale, she let you look, while never revealing everything. Susan Sarandon never posed nude for Playboy, but her presence in the magazine was no less striking. In the late 80s and early 90s, she appeared in a fashion-forward editorial spread, dressed in lingerie, photographed in soft black and white, and speaking candidly about femininity, age, and power in Hollywood. It wasn't about showing more skin, it was about owning the narrative. At a time when the industry struggled with complex aging women, Susan made it clear, you don't have to strip down to be bold. Sometimes all it takes is confidence, intelligence, and eye contact. In the 1980s and 90s, Shannon Tweed wasn't just in Playboy, she was Playboy. After becoming Playmate of the Year in 1982, she didn't fade into the background like so many others. Instead, she turned that momentum into a career, starring in a wave of steamy thrillers and late-night VHS hits that defined the erotic cinema boom of the time. But what set Shannon apart was her control. She wasn't being cast, she was choosing. Whether on the cover of the magazine or in a seductive role on screen, she leaned into the image with confidence and precision. She didn't run from the typecast, she owned it, and made it iconic. Shannon Tweed proved that you could start in Playboy, build a brand, and stay in the spotlight on your own terms.